That's a long time to bring about one person who Satan has no control over. The second thing that was required was that a people had to be established who could know who the Messiah was and who could receive him. And that was the Jewish people. So those are the two basic things that heaven was working on for 4,000 years. The first 2,000 years was, you could say in one sense, just to get out of the hole that Adam and Eve got humanity into. It's called pre-restoration history. In other words, to bring people up to a certain level where they could begin to understand restoration and then start applying it when they got the laws, the Ten Commandments and so on. So, 2,000 years was just offerings, was not even relating to the law, it was just making offerings to God that would raise up their spiritual level to the point where they could understand the law. Finally, the law came and they progressed up to the time of Jesus. So, finally Jesus arrived after 4,000 years. He had God's seal. He was born as an infant. He was born, you could say, sinless, but he was born with the potential to become the Messiah. He wasn't, in one sense, you could say, automatically the Messiah, because it's something that has to be accomplished. After all, Adam was the first human being, was born without sin, but he never fulfilled his responsibilities. Jesus was born in the same situation, but as opposed to Adam, Jesus accomplished his individual responsibility, because he was able to say, at a certain point in his life, he was able to say, when you see me, you see the Father. So it clearly indicates that he had fulfilled the first blessing, which is be fruitful. However, there is no mention of the second or third blessing in Jesus' life. And it was not accomplished. The reason is that in order to fulfill the second and third blessing, you need the cooperation of other people. Jesus was able to fulfill the first blessing on his own, but could not fulfill the second or third blessing because he needed the cooperation of other people. And he didn't have that. That was not available. So, as a result, he had to go to the cross. In a sense, everybody deserted him. Everybody somehow lost their faith, were unable to stand with him. And all he had left was his own body. It's all he had left, you could say. If there were other people who were willing to sacrifice their lives for him, he may not have had to die. But that was not the case. And as a result, it was decided after consultation with the prophets from the Old Testament on the Mount of Transfiguration, it was decided that he would go the way of the cross. That did bring great result and victory, but not what God originally intended. Jesus did not come to establish Christianity. He came to establish the kingdom of heaven on earth. And if you think about Jesus, you'll realize, we don't think about Jesus in terms of marriage so much, but if you really think about it, he was the only person who was qualified to be married. He was the only one without sin, so he really was the only person who God could have blessed his marriage. But he, for the sake of fallen humanity, he gave that up. He sacrificed that so that his death would bring about the potential that fallen humanity could be resurrected someday in the future, and if you walk that course. So there were many, many reasons why Jesus could not fulfill everything. And primarily it was a lack of faith. John the Baptist was chosen as a key person in this providence. He was born as a leader of the Old Testament and was respected by the Jewish people, and he was to be the link between the Jewish people and Jesus. He was, we know him as Jesus' cousin, but And he had a revelation which guided him to understand that Jesus was the Messiah. In the Bible, there's an instance where a dove descended on Jesus, and a voice repeated to John, "He is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." However, after that meeting, we don't hear anything about John following Jesus or testifying to Jesus. Only that one time. And very shortly afterwards, we hear that John is preaching separately from Jesus. He starts to criticize Herod. Herod gets upset with him, throws him in jail, and while he's in jail, he sends his disciples to Jesus to ask Jesus, "Are you the one who is to come, or shall we look for another?" So it's very clear, this is all in the Bible, it's very clear that John had started to doubt Jesus' validity, and therefore sent disciples to ask this question. And Jesus was not very happy to receive this kind of question, and he said, "Go and tell John what you see and hear. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, the deaf hear, and blessed is he who takes no offense at me." So Jesus was very unhappy at the fact that John had lost his faith and was asking this kind of question. And then after John's disciples left, Jesus turned to his own disciples and said, "Of he who was born of women, none is greater than John, but he who is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he." Very hard words, very hard words, for somebody who was supposed to be the most important person in God's providence at that time. So something had gone terribly wrong. John somehow lost his faith and was not able to be the key disciple. John was knowledgeable in the Old Testament. He was the son of the high priest. So he knew the Old Testament very well. He was respected. Peter was a simple fisherman, probably had maybe very limited knowledge of the Old Testament, and would not have been able to stand up to the Sadducees and Pharisees and other people who were discussing theology with him. So the intended key disciple of Jesus clearly was John the Baptist, and his disciples, anyone who was following John, would naturally have followed Jesus as John had led the way. So, in a very short space of time, I put forward some very new ideas, some of you may not have heard before, that we are now in the completed Testament age. This was declared in 1993, 1994. And what it means is that we are in an age where we have salvation for the family. Salvation for the family is now available. Up until now, no religion has discussed salvation for the family. They've only focused on salvation for the individual. And there was almost no mention of marriage in any religion until this time. Mm-hmm. The reason we have salvation for the family now is because we understand the fall. We understand what happened in the fall. The fall was a mistake of love, was a relationship that took place between Lucifer and Eve prior to Eve's maturity. Of course, it should never have taken place at all. There never should have been a relationship, a sexual relationship between an angel and a human being. But this is what happened in the fall. It's symbolized by the apple, Eve eating the apple and then giving the apple to Adam. But that is symbolic of a sexual relationship, and there's tons of quotes in the Bible which support the fact that it was a sexual act that destroyed humankind. And sadly, after Eve committed the fall, in an attempt to come back to her rightful position, she understood that Adam was her intended spouse and enticed him to behave as her husband also prior to his maturity and in her fallen state. And so both actually cut themselves off. In effect, you can say what happened in the fall was that Adam and Eve Lucifer embedded himself in Adam and Eve, embodied himself in Adam and Eve. Originally, God was to embody in Adam and Eve and live in them. You know, God wanted to wear a substantial body, wanted to live on earth, wanted to experience love with human beings. And he was going to do that through the first ancestors. And in turn, through embodying himself in the first couple, then he became our parent as well, very substantially becomes our parent as well. And that was centered on true love, on what happened. In fact, was that out of jealousy, out of feeling somehow left out, Lucifer acted totally in a self-centered way and perverted the course of love completely, turned love upside down, so that all love was self-centered from then on. And that's what we've been living with. We still had a spark of original nature buried deep inside us. God was able to work with that, and you could say, in a sense, blow on that spark by giving us little bits of truth as time proceeded. And that spark grew a little bit. We could receive a little more truth, we could develop a bit more, receive a bit more truth, and so on. So painstakingly, God had to work very painstakingly, very slowly to breathe new life into us. What should have been accomplished in 21 years has turned into a 6,000-year odyssey. Adam and Eve ideally should have reached maturity and become one with God within a 21-year lifespan. But somewhere around the age of 15 or 16, they were essentially hijacked, and connected to fallen, self-centered love. And it was disastrous because that was passed down to every generation since to us. We have aspects of the fall within each one of us today. We have self-centered feelings, selfish love feelings, lustful feelings. All of those things are present in all of humanity today. But God has never given up his ideal, and he promised at the time of Jesus, he promised to said the Messiah would come again. Jesus said he would come again. What he's really referring to is that the position of the Messiah will reoccur again in the second coming. And we're saying that has now happened. The Messiah has returned. I couldn't be speaking to you about the things I'm speaking to you today if he hadn't returned. But one of the missions of the Messiah is to reveal God's providence, is to reveal God's ideal in the beginning. He has to reveal the tragedy of the human fall, and he has to reveal the process of restoration. And the process, in revealing the process of restoration, it enables all of us to escape from the fall, to come out from the fall. Once we understand that and apply the principles we've learned, then we too can escape from the dominion of Satan. And we're in that era now. That's why we call it the completed Testament era. We're in that era now. I know True Mother is talking these days about the Channel-Guk era, and of course I fully accept that. But True Parents themselves proclaimed the completed Testament age in 1993, 1994. Father started the process in 1993, and then Mother visited more than 44 countries, also proclaiming that we were now in the completed Testament age. But we as members really have not proclaimed it. And in one sense, I feel in order for us to enter Channel-Guk, or enter the kingdom of heaven, or build the kingdom of heaven, we have to proclaim that. Christianity needs to hear that. Judaism needs to hear that we're in the completed Testament age, which means full understanding, full explanation of God's providence is now available. We need to study it, we need to understand it, we need to apply it. But the potential for everybody to get out from under the dominion of Satan is now available to all of us. Is available to all of us. It's up to us to how hard we work, how much we develop. We're all beginning from different places, so we can't judge each other. We shouldn't judge each other and evaluate how bad this person is doing or is not doing, whatever. We should realize that we are a result of our ancestry. Some people start in a more difficult position. Some people start in a better position. But it's, our merit is to what we do in our stretch of life. The period that we are here on earth, we can make a big difference for our ancestors who've already passed on, or a small difference if we make little effort. But it's a great time to be alive. It's a great time to be on earth, and it's especially a great time if we understand what time we're at in providential history. So we can improve our situation, we can improve our ancestors' situation, and we can also improve the world situation. We can, and this truth has the potential to unify the world. It applies to everybody, regardless of religious background, national background, racial background. We're all from the same origin. We're all from the same first couple. And so this truth has the ability to bring everybody together. It has the potential. We can ultimately we can all celebrate the same holidays worldwide, and be joyful about it. So I know a lot of this already, but the reason I wanted to share it today is because I think we have the potential now to bring people in one evening, in one lecture, from the Old Testament, from the New Testament to the completed Testament. In one evening, they can realize the value of the blessing and could participate. I was thinking this morning about Billy Graham, how he used to gather hundreds of thousands of people in the stadiums and baptize them. That is now available in terms of the blessing. People come to a talk like that and they understand that there's a new level. It's not just baptism anymore. It's blessing. It's marriage. Your marriage can be blessed. Your marriage can be connected to heaven. But you need to understand how you're supposed to live. You need to understand that love has to be true. There cannot be any cheating or any unfaithfulness and those kind of things. That has to end. And then once you receive that blessing, if you obey those standards, then you can keep that blessing for eternity. I absolutely believe that. And I've seen it in my own life that, God has blessed me because I've stayed faithful to those promises. And I'm grateful. I've had, my life has gotten better, gotten happier, gotten more harmonious. I'm not where I should be. I'm not having to complete everything, but definitely I've been healed and become much happier as a result of understanding the principle and applying it in my own life. Mm-hmm. So thank you very much for listening today. I want Christianity and Judaism to understand that we're now in the completed Testament era, and there's a whole plethora of new realities available to us. Once we understand and once we apply it. So thank you very much.